actually use animals to symbolize my personality type. Every type has their own weaknesses, and generally they come from their strengths. A fox will shoot 1,000 shots to hit one target. A shark will wait 1,000 hours to take one shot to hit that target. Killer whales and spiders, they want information for impact. The killer whale will stab you in the front, the spider will stab you in the back. People can't change because we grow.
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Are you ready to move beyond the macho bully or the soy boy archetypes? I'm Marc Azoulay, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together, we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. Today we're diving deep into the fascinating world of personality types with my guest, Eric G. And forget about using these abstract letters or combinations of numbers to understand who you are. Eric makes this really accessible by using different animals. He's developed a unique system that's not just for self-discovery, it's used by major companies like Disney and Hulu to build better teams and boost productivity. We're talking about foxes, sharks, even baboons. And you'll see how understanding these animals can unlock incredible insights about yourself and everyone around you. So get ready to decode the hidden language of personality right after this. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm here with Eric G, and we're talking about different personality types. So Eric has developed a system that he's used in some pretty serious companies. He's done it with Disney, with Hulu. He's out there trying to help people understand themselves and understand other people, help teams work more efficiently together. He's an author, he's a life coach, he's a writing coach. And the name of his book is The Power of Personality: Unlock the Secrets to Understanding Everyone in Your Life, Including Yourself. And one other thing about him is that he runs a creative space in Los Angeles called Utopia Creatives. So Eric, welcome to the show. You have quite a repertoire of achievements and accomplishments.
Oh, thank you for having me, Mark. And that's impressive just considering how lazy I am. And, I try to get as much done as possible, but, it's going to be difficult based on my own personality type.
Yeah, I can't wait to dive into that. When you're talking, I'm going to be like, oh, do me. I'm curious if I can.
Let me guess. I would definitely love to guess what type you are.
Awesome. That'd be a cool thing to do as we're going through. So here we like to start with the personal story, right? So I'm curious, what got you into this work? Were you someone that studied different people and personalities growing up? How did you learn this?
It's funny. It goes all the way back. I guess everyone can do that. It goes all the way back. I was talking to my dad when I was younger, and I'm talking like 5 or 6 years old. And I guess it comes from my dad. My dad would just tell me, look, the way people are and the way people think about them, don't always believe it, right? People are different than how, I guess society or just your social circle of friends reads them, because we often have this one visor that we look through. And so he just told me, just don't listen to what people say, just listen to what they're doing and then try to think about why they're doing it. And that should tell you a little bit more about people. And I just always had that in my mind. So as I got older and I started feeling people are a lot different than we're told that we should act, right? People are always told to act a certain way in school. I was not always the best student. And I was like, there's gotta be something to this where, unless there's something totally wrong with me, I got to figure out what it is, if there is something wrong with me. And it just led me to studying about personality type, and I read a lot about it. And then I eventually started my own education company. We'd work with about 1,000 students a year, including their parents. And so essentially I trained my teachers to learn this personality typing methodology to figure out more about their students so that they wouldn't allow their own bias to work against them.
Yeah, I think that's so important now, with the conversations around neurodiversity, right, and different learning styles. I feel like, I imagine maybe we're so much generation. Are you a millennial, Eric?
I'm not. I'm actually a Gen Xer. So Gen Xers for all those Winona Ryder fans out there. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so I'd be curious your experience. I think it was different, right? Because I know the millennial generation is when, learning disabilities were really coming into their own and people were learning different ways to teach students. And now we're getting another wave of, neurodiversity, people on the spectrum and things like that. But with Gen X, they just left you to the wolves, right? They were it was kind of one size fits all from my understanding.
Yeah, it was definitely, they didn't care. They're just walk to school when you're 7 and walk back home, when you're 7, which I kind of actually, to be honest, maybe it's a generational, I like that idea of that. I know in Japan, little kids still go on the train, by themselves, but it was definitely, like you said, thrown to the wolves. Yeah, you do you and try to figure it out on your own.
Yeah, so I can imagine as a kid, if you didn't fit into that mold, it would have been really difficult, right, to learn and to figure out like how to navigate the world, like you're saying.
Yeah, I think it's gotten a lot better. I think just like everything else. I mean, everyone likes to complain. I think in America we do like to complain a lot. I think we're a little bit spoiled. We got it pretty good here, but I think generationally, it's definitely better than it was 10 years ago, and 10 years ago is better than it was first 10 years before that, and on and on it goes, right? And I think we do spend a lot of time now, like you said, not neurodivergence and trying to figure out, oh, this person learns differently. Like, let me not put the onus on them to learn my way, but let me try to adjust and meet them where they're at. And I think the same can be said true for personality typing as well. And the more people learn about it, not only just by in the education setting, but just in a personal setting, it might help relationships quite a bit.
Yeah. So you said you were studying personality types, and I'm a psychotherapist. We learn a lot about that stuff, as we're going through education. Were there any in particular that stood out to you?
I learned MBTI, which I think is the one that everyone learns. Myers-Briggs, for anyone who doesn't know, and I liked it, and that was the first thing I learned. I was like, oh, this is really cool, and I figured out what my type was, and I was like, wow, this really fits, and it also shows why I'm weird, or at least different.
What's your type from Myers-Briggs?
My type from Myers-Briggs is an ENFP.
Okay.
So and my methodology still uses 16 types, just like Myers-Briggs, but in setting it and I want to say experimenting, but like observing my students over the course of owning the education company for a decade. Like you start to see I won't say cracks in the theories, but more so like things that don't totally match. Like everyone always complains because I'm always like, yeah, introversion, extroversion. But people are like, well, I'm extroverted in this situation. I'm introverted in this situation. So it's all, garbage. And I was like, well, there has to be more to it. So my methodology is based more on a value system and how we value things differently. So even though it has 16 personality types, I actually use animals to symbolize my personality type, because that's easy to remember.
Way more accessible than just 4 random letters, right?
Everyone's done MBTI, right? Everyone's like, yeah, I know. I was like some common, I don't know, L, J, M, they forget, right? But everyone remembers. If they're a fox, they'll remember. They're like, oh yeah, I'm a fox. And, people love being a fox. That's, some don't like being their animal, but, I'm a baboon. That's not the most flattering animal. So I'm just like, hey, you know what? Just suck it up. If you don't like your animal, too bad.
Yeah. Learn to love the animal within, right?
Exactly. That's probably a lesson in and of itself, right? Learn to love yourself. Not everyone can be cool like a fox. Some people are more structured and serious, like beavers. They build dams. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So okay. So you learn in the education company, and then you decide to take it corporate, or what happened after that? How do you make the jump?
So it's funny. I shuttered my education company, and I actually got into writing again. My academic background is in screenwriting, and so I started trying to write screenplays again. And it just so happened that I met a friend who, and I joined a writing group, and we would talk about this personality typing at a bar afterwards. And, everyone got into it, and they were like, oh, you know what? You should write a book on that. And of course I didn't. I was like, no, I'm going to keep writing my scripts about animals or rabbits that are sex addicted. It was a story. And then she put it in the show that she writes for. And so I was like, oh, I guess she, in the one episode of the show that she writes for, she kind of featured my animal types in a funny way. She changed the animals, but I was like, okay, I guess I should write a book on this, because this is a great way to pitch it to, as featured on, Apple TV, and then I went back to the life coaching and writing coaching. And then a friend of mine, sorry, this is a long roundabout way of answering this question, but
interesting.
A friend of mine was a project director or product manager, one of the two, at Hulu and Disney, or I guess they're both the same company. And so I started working with her teams on it and giving her advice on how to work better with her software engineers. And that's how I came out with the corporate angle.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm curious, what kind of results have you gotten once you've implemented this in a team?
I will notice that people listen more. They might not like each other more, but at least they'll know, okay, at least it's consistent. What's coming, why it's coming, let's say, especially with software engineers, not to I don't want to put a big blanket on all of them, but oftentimes they're not always the most socially adept, when you spend a lot of time learning about coding, and which has to do with their personalities. Some personalities are much more based on information and less based on interacting with people, which is okay. But of course that can be a weakness when working on a team. So I think sometimes those people can come off like assholes maybe. And I think it's more or less understanding that, no, they're just honest. I mean, they're just not really caring what you have to say, and they're just going to tell you what they think. And I think that helps the team work better. Even they might not get along and they might not have a beer afterwards. They'll still like work better together and be more productive.
I can see that, right? I think especially we do it a lot in therapy and in the men's groups I run and things like that, of like really understanding like diversity of thought and diversity of just like perception almost. Because I think that's one of the hardest ones for people to really grapple is like people process the world very, very differently.
Oh, right. For sure. Like I had a parent once not complaining, but like talking about her son. And she's like, I don't understand. Like I asked him how I looked. And then he said I looked like crap. Like when she was dressed up. And I was like, well, maybe he was just being honest. And she was like, yeah, he was being honest, but he's not supposed to tell me that. He's supposed to tell me I look great. I'm his mom, you know? And I'm like, well, you know, he thought you wanted an actual honest answer because that's the way he perceived your question, right?
I thought you were actually asking a question, not just like seeking validation, right?
Right, exactly. He was just like, I thought you wanted honesty, and that's what I'm bringing you. Like the greatest gift he can give is honesty. And she got mad at him, and then she felt bad, and she's like, oh, okay, that's just my son.
Yeah, so let's dive into the theory, right? You said it was based on values. I'm sure you've explained it tons of times. So I'll just give you the spotlight. What's the best way to start to explain your theory of personality?
So I think thinking that we can separate, and I hate to say the word categorize, but I'll just say it, categorize people into 4 different packs. And I use the term packs because obviously they're animal personality types. And each pack has a different core value. And one of them might be safety and security. And that is like 50% approximately of the world. So you can imagine like that is what we're taught like in school, like how to be safe, how to like keep your homework structured in an organized manner. They value the idea of certainty oftentimes because when they're certain about things, that makes them feel safer, right? We know black, this is white. Then sometimes we feel a little bit safer. And that's one pack. And then maybe a third of the population. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. So that first pack, I call them gatherers. The second pack, I call them hunters. And they make about a third of the population, and they value like visceral excitement, like getting out there and feeling, seeing, smelling the world. And then there's like the 2 other packs that make up, I'd say the minority packs. They're about, let's say 8% of the population each. And I call them Smiths and Shamans. And they value, one values self-knowledge and the other values information. So sorry, it's getting really wonky, but like those 2 ways I would divide them. And you can see those are 4 values that are very, very, can be very counter to each other. So.
Yeah, that's pretty good. So there's this theory of masculinity from like Jungian psychology where they divide it into king, warrior, magician, and lover. So I think that almost overlays with the packs that you're putting out.
Oh yeah,
as far as like the 4 different archetypes of the people.
I love how they put like the gatherers essentially are the kings, right? I mean that it's funny how that's like, oh no, they should be in charge a little bit, but yeah, it's worse out. Lover is probably self-knowledge, and wizard or magician is probably information, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's just like
your D&D avatar. Well, what D&D avatar? Who would you be? Would you be like a halfling thief? I don't know. It all comes down.
Well, I mean, what would you be? I play D&D.
Oh, I was just making. I was just trying to the halfling thief. I was just trying to pull out something. I wouldn't be that, but it is kind of. I actually wrote an article about what D&D avatar would you be based on your personality type. I thought that was funny.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I'm a paladin through and through. That's my shit.
That says a lot already.
Yeah, quite rigid in some ways, trying to do the right thing even when it's like not appropriate, in this situation, kind of thing. A little
spiritual. Paladins are spiritual, right?
Yeah,
they're spiritual warriors, steadfast warriors.
Yeah, spiritual practice. I've trained in Buddhism and things like that. So I've some of that there. Okay, so you got these 4 packs. So yeah, let's break them open. Like what are in each of these packs when you subdivide a little bit more?
Okay, yeah. So there's the gather pack, and let's go down because that's the majority of people.
Mostly
start with that. Then there's 4 animals within the gather pack, and of course 4 times 4 is 16, right? So 16 personality types in total, and you can separate those 2 groups based on what they value within that value, right? So if you value safety and security, we think of the things that give us a feeling of safety and security. And for them, they value the idea of duty, like what should I be doing? What is like society telling me I should be doing in my role? And then family. And I say that and everyone's like, oh, but I value my family too. I'm like, yeah, I get it. Everybody loves family, but we do value our family differently, And for those 2 gather types or sections, the example I always give is like, if you go to a parent-teacher conference, right? It's like and the teacher just rails on the student, right? It's the parent's reaction can tell us what gatherer they are. If the parent immediately sides with the teacher, they're probably duty followers, right? And so I call those stags and beavers.
Okay.
And then if the parent sides with the kid, or maybe like falls on their sword for the kid and saying like, oh, like it's my fault, I haven't been home quite a bit, I always get home late, I haven't helped them with their homework, then they would fall on the family side. And the animals on the family side are elephants and bears. So that's how I divide those two. So you get duty followers and family followers, and they all fall under the umbrella of safety and security. And those would be the gatherers.
Okay. And then I just got to ask, is it subdivided one more time? Like what separates like a stag and a beaver?
A stag and a beaver. So I would say a stag and a beaver, because they follow duty as like their main priority, but the stag follows a chain of command. Like they emphasize chain of command. Beavers emphasize rules. And I know a lot of people might say, isn't that the same thing? Like a chain of command is like a set of rules. And it's like, yes and no. Like it's more, a chain of command is more like, I'm going to listen to you because you're above me, and the people below me are going to listen to me because I'm above them, right? Whereas a beaver might hold the person above them more accountable to the rules if they break the rules. And that will be the difference between the two.
It's more kind of like the universal values or the universal game, right? And authority isn't as important, but it sounds like for stags, it's all authority. Even if there isn't like consistency amongst the authority, it's more about like rank and status.
Right. And I don't want to, sometimes that sounds bad, because obviously we see a lot of movies where stags are often the bad guys, because like, what are they doing? They're just falling above them. I think most of the time stags are like, look, I understand that this is a little rigid, but especially in the context that they're in quite a bit, like chain of command is very, very important. Like oftentimes military, law enforcement, legal system, where it's like, yeah, you can't really think too much about what the person above you says, because if you think too much and like start to analyze that, then you're dead, right? Because sometimes you just have to follow orders, right? Like that's the way it goes. In sports, same thing. You listen to your coach, whatever they say, right? And then maybe complain when the game is not on the line, right? So, I just want to, since stags are picked on quite a bit, even though stags make up a large percentage of the ruling population, so I guess we shouldn't feel too bad for them.
Right, yeah. Isn't it doing pretty good in the world right now?
Yeah. And I always say, since, I know your podcast is about men's therapy and like, I guess, gender specifics, like I think the stag personality type is what men are told they should be. Like that is exactly what they're told. They should be confident, like certain about things, structured, organized, responsible, aggressive. Like if they want something, they take it, but they're also like once again, responsible and family oriented, because gatherers are all family oriented. And I think that's what men are told they should be. And so that works for about, 12% of men, but it doesn't, and that leaves out like 88% of, the gender, which can be a little bit difficult, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think our culture certainly rewards that stag mentality, right? It's like, if you buy into the system fully, you will get rewarded. You leave other parts of your personality on the table, but there is like a clear path. When I think of stag, like you said, I feel like that's like a track. Like it feels very linear.
Oh yeah, 100%. They're just like, no, I don't understand. Why don't you just do what works? That worked for me, but of course not everything that works for you is going to work for other people, right? But they're in their mind, they're like, no, it worked for me, so just do it. I will say they're very confident. So even if they aren't right, they're definitely sound that they're right about things.
And that goes a long way. It's the power of it.
That's like my mom. My mom is a stag, and she, by the way, it's also the school principal type. My mom was a school principal, which makes it funny that I was such a bad student. But she's constantly saying stuff like, "Oh yeah, I know how to gut a fish or gut." And I'm like, you don't know. When was the last time you've gutted and scaled a fish? But she'll talk about it like she's done it like 1,000 times.
She's an expert on that. She's getting enough points on that level, and she's like, I got this locked in.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Because no one's gonna challenge. Well, unless people challenge her, she'll like be able to skate by, right?
Yeah, no one's gonna be like, got this fish right now, right? Just throw it on the table, like do it.
I'll be honest, sometimes I do that. Where I'm not necessarily the fish metaphor or fish example, but I'll call her out all the time on that.
So the next one you said is family. So I'm curious when you say that they like value family, right? Is it they value the connection, they value like legacy or lineage? Like, can you unpack that a little bit more? What do you mean by valuing family?
I guess they would, at their worst, they would be smotherers. So when you think of like, because I think we can all value family to experience. They're like the duty followers, they're not siding with the teacher just because they don't like their kid. They're siding because they're like, I love my kid and I want them to be a fine, upstanding citizen. So because that's my duty as a parent. So I need to make sure when they get out there, they are like a good person. I think the family prioritizers are just so, I guess I want to say, yeah, soft-hearted. I think that's okay to say someone's soft-hearted. They're just so warm. And so like an elephant wants to bring people into their family. So not just the people they're related to, but they're the parent who, they're the parent of your friend who's always like, hey, you want to stay over for dinner? Like they're that type who's always wanting to bring friends and like into like their large family. Whereas I think the bears are a lot more about protecting the family that they already have. Like they're very protective, like sometimes overly protective. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just like connection, like an actual like warm connection to their children is super important to them, which I think it's not that necessarily a priority for other types, right? Even though I think society sometimes tells us it should be a priority, I think other personalities are, well, no, I just want them to be good citizens, or I want to make sure that they're following their ambitions, which is different than having a warm personal connection with your kid.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you said that because, I work with a number of divorced dads, right, and new fathers. And even just you saying that, like, not everybody feels that way is so critical because, in a therapy room, it's confidential. And guys will often say, like, yeah, I don't feel this way towards my kid. Like, am I a sociopath? I mean, really, like they go all the way down the deep hole of, like, am I, like, deeply, deeply broken because I'm not having this experience that seemingly everybody else is having,
Yeah, they have stories with Abraham Lincoln where, he looked at his kids. I mean, and Abraham Lincoln we'll go into that later, but this was a Smith type, and they're odd. I mean, he's odd with quotations, because I don't think they're odd, but I think a lot of people might think they're odd. And they're just very curious about things. They prioritize information. So oftentimes Smiths, like Abraham Lincoln, will just look at their kids like interesting creatures to observe. And that's kind of, that objectivity is actually really appreciated by those kids, especially when they get older. And that's the parent that's least likely to smother them and go, oh, let me follow you to college. Oh, where are you moving? You're moving away? No, you need to stay close to home. That parent will say, no, yeah, go travel the world and like find out different things that I would also be curious, like to find out. And they're just much more interested in figuring out what their kid really likes. And they might give them the opportunity to follow that, but they might not necessarily seem to be the most loving, right? And I think we can just understand that every personality type, especially when it comes to parents, parenting has its strengths and weaknesses, and those things are generally related to each other. I think that makes us happier and healthier.
I agree. Yeah. And like some things I tell my dudes is like, just find other parent figures that can cover the bases that you can't cover. So if you are more of that, like, Smith kind of like tinkerer, mechanistic version, like find someone really warm, like because your kid will also benefit from that,
Right. I mean, there's lots of different role models and parental figures out that aren't like, related to us, which is great. I think that's the beauty of like living in a kind of a sophisticated, nice society, is that we have that coaches, teachers, all those kinds of things.
Yeah. So let's back to the theory, right? Now we're on hunters, right? So what's the subdivision there?
Oh, hunters. Yeah. Hunters love it. Hunters are the ones who are like, hunters, woohoo, they love to party. They just love, like, so that's the typical, like, that's the typical dichotomy, right? When you just see pop culture is hunter gatherer. Right? Like you see like everyone, there's Bert and there's Ernie, right? There's the odd couple, and I forgot their names because I'm Gen Xer and I never watched the odd couple, but like I think we think of like the responsible, structured person and then the fun, spontaneous person, right? Mm-hmm. Hunters would be the fun, spontaneous person. They love excitement. Now they go about getting it different ways. Like I split it up based on their foxes and sharks, and they get their excitement by adrenaline. Like they get that adrenaline rush. Okay. Versus the peacocks and butterflies, they get their excitement through consumption, consuming the world. So I think the equivalent would be, or the difference might be riding a roller coaster versus having a nice meal, and I think that would be the biggest difference. So yeah, foxes and sharks, they're like risk takers. They love action. They love to like feel like they're scared, which is funny, which is why it's so different than gatherers, right? Because gatherers love safety and security. So like, wait, why would I want to feel scared? I want to feel safe. And hunters like, no, but that's the fun of life, is when, things are, you might die. You're not going to die. It's like a 1% chance, but that 1% makes it pretty fun, So.
Okay. I got that, right? So it's like, yeah, I mean, it's like hedonism, right? But I'm hearing like one's hedonistically said consumption and like sensorial hedonism, right? And then one is more like, I guess experiences or danger seeking, or this idea of like overcoming challenge in a way, right? Like kind of like the roller coaster, like you said, the pitch.
Right. And I like that you said hedonistic, because obviously that's a negative. That's how they go. Like when at their most negative, they consume too much, right? So the butterflies,
all pleasure
works. Yeah, like you think of the wide receiver. A lot of wide receivers are peacocks because they're so physical. Like peacocks are the most physical of the types, and they love to move. Like you meet a peacock, they're almost always gonna be dancing, even though there's not music going on. They're just hearing music in their head, and they're just dancing in line. Of course, their weakness is that they can overconsume. So I always think of like athletes who are really ripped when they're playing, and then once they retire, they kind of gain a lot of weight because that consumption continues, but obviously the exercise maybe doesn't continue. So yeah, every type has their own weaknesses, and generally they come from their strengths, right?
Yeah. Okay. So let's dive into this. What's the difference between a peacock and a butterfly?
Peacocks. Well, I think of peacocks as like they are the model. They're like the performer. They're like the one who wants the spotlight. Butterflies are more of like a butterfly. They'll go into their artistic cocoon, whether they're a songwriter, whether they're a visual artist or a chef. They'll go in there into their lab, kitchen, studio, and work on that, and then bring it out, their work of art for people to admire. So I think that would be the biggest difference. I guess you could say if peacocks are the model, fashion model, then butterflies are the fashion designer.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense, right? So yeah, like peacocks are kind of always on display. Whereas what I'm hearing you say is that like the butterflies are like, they take their time and then they give you the completed project when it's done.
Yeah, and you generally I usually use like one word sometimes, and sometimes if you're experiencing and meeting a lot of different people, you can get it to where it's like, oh yeah, okay, just the feeling someone gives off can give you their personality type. And peacocks are loud. Like that's the feeling like, oh, this person is loud, and they're like always like at Spinal Tap terms, they're up to 11, where butterflies are a lot more gentle and soft spoken. So like a lot of men, when men are butterflies, it can be tricky, right? Because oftentimes they're thought of, which is nothing wrong, they could be thought of as being gay or like effeminate. Like they get it because of the expectations of what a dude is supposed to be, right? And it sucks because, there's a lot of like gentle male butterflies, like Bob Dylan or something, like who have a lot to contribute, right? But if they're told at a young age, oh no, this is wrong, there's something wrong with you, you need to toughen up, then I think we're taking a lot of their strengths away.
If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show. So I also work with a lot of software engineers, right? And they're more on that smithing type. Well, we haven't gotten there yet, but when I think of them, I think of the butterfly archetype too, where some of them they just want to be left alone. They want to do their project. They really do find artistic creativity in it a lot of times. But then they get upset because they're like, oh, I didn't know I had to play office politics. I didn't know I had to talk to people or go to the happy hours or actually mingle. I thought my work would speak for itself. And I get promoted because I'm making good shit.
Right. Yeah. Then obviously a lot of companies don't work that way. They're like, no, who knows who? And how much have you gone to once again, it's because a lot of the ruling class tend to be gatherers, and gatherers that's how they run. That's how they roll. They're like, what's the structural system of our company? Who do you know? And I think that works to a certain extent, but obviously that's there can be a huge downside to that too. Right.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's upsetting for some people, different personality types, because likability is a factor that they just weren't aware of and didn't really spec for, and they're like, oh no, I have to learn these skills that I maybe struggle with my whole life because their personality type or whatever their inclinations are.
Yeah. They're like, wait, I thought just doing my job and doing it really well would work for me. But, and obviously there are certain companies that do. I do think software engineering, at least of all the companies, or at least I guess, financial sectors, I do think software engineering is definitely better at appreciating oddballs. I'm putting that in quotes, air quotes, as opposed to finance or something like that. Finance and that gets a little bit even more who do you know? Are you cool? Are you a cool person? Versus I think software engineering at least is a little bit more forgiving about that.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think some things like finance, they're so inside baseball and networking and lineage and all that kind of stuff.
That's all that's where a lot of hunters are in finance, in terms of stock trading, the hunters, the foxes and the sharks, because they like to hustle. Hunters are pure hustlers, right? If you tell them they're not going to do the linear approach, unless they think it's going to benefit them, but they're definitely no, I would prefer to just hustle and do my thing. I don't mind if I do work really hard on something, and if I fail, then I don't get rewarded. They're because if I don't do a good job, then it's okay. But if I do a good job, you better reward me. And they tend to financial or jobs that appreciate that.
Okay, so is it more competition? Do you go to that side? That more motivates them?
Yeah, hunters are big on competition, specifically the foxes and the sharks, because they're the competition, especially with sports. Like if you get off on adrenaline, obviously sports are automatically your adrenaline's going to rise, right? So like that's a big thing for them is competition.
Okay. Yeah. So what differentiates a fox and a shark?
I always differentiate the fox and the shark by saying a fox will shoot 1,000 shots to hit one target. A shark will wait 1,000 hours to take one shot to hit that target. And I think that's different, right? Like not to use a bar metaphor, but if a fox is at a bar and they want to pick up someone, they're just like, I'll pick 20 people who I think are hot. I was ask 20 people, and because they're like, well, look, let's say I get rejected 19 times, right? That still means that I'm going home with one person.
More right? Gonna hurt. Yeah.
You're right. That I'm okay with, right? A shark might be like, I got to find the right person, Okay, that person. Okay, what do they like? And they just focus really hard on that, and then they go for it, and they pounce. And you can see those two mentalities are very useful depending on the situation, right?
Yeah, I've never made that distinction before. Like I've talked to my clients about like developing from fox to shark. The way I've talked about it is like going from like a barbarian to a samurai. Like I think a lot of like, especially young dudes in the hustle culture, like we start as barbarians where just like attack everything with full force and like maybe something will work. And then the samurai is like, what you talking about with the shark is like one cut, right? It's like know exactly how to do the one cut that like cuts the dude in half, from the movies.
Yeah, I think it's I do like that idea of like, you can't just smash everything in sight, right? Like I would say foxes, when they mature and they grow, it's more about figuring out what are, like at a bar, okay, what are the 20, as opposed to asking everybody at the bar, let me figure out 10 to 20 people that I like and then ask that 10 to 20. Like there's this movie, and I write about it in the book. That's the reference point I use, is this movie called Billy Batgate. And I know it's like really obscure, but Dustin Hoffman was in it.
Never heard of it.
Nicole Kidman was in it. And Bruce Willis. Like 3 stars were in it. But basically Dustin Hoffman plays a gangster back in the day, Dutch Schultz. And he's got a little assistant named Billy Batgate. He's a kid, right? And Billy Batgate is looking at Dutch Schultz enforcers, right? And they're shooting, at targets, right? And one guy who's played by Steve Buscemi, wow, a lot of cool actors in this movie. He's hitting the target and hitting the head on every single shot, but he's just taking his time, bang, bang, right? And the other guy just takes 2 guns out as and he's like, the target, right? And so Dutch Schultz is like, hey, like which one's better? Who's better? And Billy Batgate's like, oh, this guy, because he hit the target exactly, like all his shots got in one spot. And then Dutch Schultz is like, well, it depends, right? Like if you want to put a hit out on somebody, you want that guy, right? Because he's going to be really precise. But if there's a big scrap where you got to like just make things up on the fly, you want the guy who's just like, because, he's like in 1 second, 2 seconds, it's all over.
Yeah, totally. Right. Yeah. And I love that idea. And the fox being like the scrappy person that can just like improvise and be agile and just like make decisions very quickly. Where I imagine like the shark struggles with that,
Yeah. You want them to be your quarterback, a fox, but you want the shark. If, Michael Jordan's a shark, and generally basketball players are better as sharks because, they'll go into the gym and work on their shot and take like 20,000 shots. Right. And then they go out and they're super precise and they're intense. And basketball tends to be a little bit more, one-sided, like focus on the one person, where obviously football, quarterback has to adjust and make up stuff on the fly. So it's kind of cool in that way where you can scout actual NFL players and go, okay, what position is good for, or what personality is good for what position,
Yeah. So I want to go through the other ones, but I am curious on that idea. Like when you work with companies, are you helping them like build teams of different types? Because I can see it being really useful from like a hiring perspective or just team comp perspective.
I would love to do. I've never actually done that before. I did that way back in the day when I was like an assistant scoutmaster at a Boy Scout troop, and I was making patrols based on my personality typing methodology. In the past, no, when I was working with a company, it was more like, okay, who do you got? Who's underneath you? Like who's working for you? And then what are their personality types and how to fit better? That would be really interesting. I would love to be able to like construct a team essentially based on their personalities. And I wonder if it would work out theoretically, or it work out practically the way it works out theoretically.
Yeah, I'd be so curious because you're saying, I imagine there's like tasks that are better suited to hunters versus gatherers and things like that, and trying to really like build the dream team for whatever the project is.
Yeah, and it's just really important for people to know their personality at an individual level, right? Like I've been telling this story quite a bit. Like my cousin's kid just graduated from pharmacy school, and I was like, oh, like, so now what do you want to do with your life, right? And he's like, as long as I don't have to be in the same place all day long. And I was like, that's exactly what a pharmacist does. The task itself was going to be so bad for him. He's a shark. So he's a hustler type, right? And I know when he joined or enrolled in pharmacy school, I was thinking, oh, is that good for his personality? I don't really know, but it's not none of my business. And now that he's graduated, I'm like, wow, okay, well, you should have known that beforehand. So I recommended like maybe going into sales, pharmaceutical sales, because that might be way better for a hustler, right? Like you can travel, bounce around. So just knowing your personality type is just good because it'll help you maybe decide what task and what job works better for your own values.
Totally. Yeah, and I think like the idea of like, having your dream job, I think that died with my generation, right? Like we realized that like work kind of sucks no matter what you do.
Are you millennial? That sounds like a millennial.
Okay. Very millennial. Yeah. I think a lot of us have the message of like, live your dream and live your passion and change the world, right? And a lot of us just end up getting just regular ass jobs. And we're like, oh, shit,
Yeah, I'm in this cubicle just looking, 3 walls, not even walls, 3 like, dividers.
Yeah, it's like I'm not saving the planet. I'm just like doing spreadsheets, or like making phone calls.
Yeah, I remember one time, that's what one guy said to me once. He's like, are you looking for a job? I'm like, yeah. He's like, do you want to be an accountant? Because there's always jobs. He himself is an accountant. He's like, we're always looking for accountants. And no offense, I mean, a lot of people are great at accounting, especially Beavers, which are one of the gatherers. But for my personality type, God, that would be hell. I would rather just not have a job,
Yeah, but you want that Beaver person, right? You want that person that just like knows the rules, does it well, executes every time, right? And is like helping you like avoid unnecessary risk.
Oh yeah, and there are people who like to press probably 12% of the population, and so it's like, yeah, like that's great, like that's great for them, and they shouldn't be told, oh, you need to do something where you're getting excitement and stuff, like and bouncing around and traveling, where they're be like, well, I don't really like to travel, sorry, I mean maybe a little bit, but not necessarily for work. I kind of want something certain where I can go every day at this time, and I know what my job is, and I'll do it,
Yeah. So you said you're a baboon. What is that under?
Baboons are shamans.
Shamans. Okay.
Yeah. So I think you might be a shaman. That would be my guess. But you can tell me as I describe it, you can tell me, oh yeah, that fits, or maybe not. So shamans are always, their value is self-knowledge, right? So I call them shamans because if you had a shaman in a village, they would kind of be the soul of the village. They would tell people, oh, it's going to rain, guys. Like gatherers, go harvest the crops. So they would essentially be like the spiritual leaders, maybe not necessarily the logistical leader. They might be the village chief, but they would be the shaman, right? And I would separate those two factions, I guess, for lack of a better term, of shamans into like one prioritizes people and the other prioritizes principles, right? So if your number one value is self-knowledge, your own, and also helping people gain self-knowledge for themselves, the people prioritizers would definitely fall into that, right? Where they're like, they want to be around people, they want to be like, so you'll find them in organizations like the ministry, psychiatrics, like mental health, education, like those two. The only organization you probably won't find them in is probably the military. There's not gonna be a lot of shamans in the military unless they're a chaplain, just because of the chain of command and the structure might be they might chafe at that. So, but yeah, you'll find a lot of pandas and a lot of dolphins. Those are the two animals that prioritize people under in organizations where they can work with those people.
Okay.
And then there are the baboons, which I'm a baboon, and humpback whales. They would be on the principle side. And that would mean that they prioritize their morale and principles above all. So if the example I give in the book is, let's say you're a teacher, you're a shaman teacher, and the principal comes up to you and says, hey, I love the curriculum that you're doing. It's really cool. It's different. And you can't do that because it's against the rules. And you're not following proper procedure. So I think pandas and dolphins, since they prioritize people, would be like, I really like this and I value this quite a bit. But if I get fired, which is the implication from this principle, then I'm not going to be around people to help them. So they're a lot more pragmatic, and they would kind of assimilate their curriculum to fit. They would do their best to assimilate it to the structure, that the rules, right? So in a sense, they might be giving up a lot of their own principles to help the people. Baboons and humpback whales will just say, screw it, fuck that. Like, I'm just going to do what I do, and you can do what you want to do with it, and so they will just do it, and they might get fired. So obviously there are pros and cons to each, right? The pandas and dolphins sometimes feel like maybe insecure because like, oh, did I give up myself? Did I capitulate? So that makes them feel kind of crappy, and they might seem a little weak, but then they're also pragmatic because they get to be there. Baboons and humpback whales look really courageous and valiant, but they're not there. You get fired. So Those are the breaks, right?
Yeah, I think I'm on the principal side, because when you said that, I was like, oh, just quit immediately and just like start your own school, right?
Yeah, start your own school. Is like, yeah, just well, you might be a baboon too, unless you're a humpback whale. But those are the two sides. Yeah, it's just like, have you seen Dead Poet Society?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that teacher clearly is a baboon. Robin Williams, baboon, and that's a really good movie for shamans. It's not particularly generous to gatherers, but for shamans, every shaman should watch that, because they can be like, oh, okay, like, because a lot of the kids that he's working with, at least a couple of them are shaman types as well. Not exactly like him. Like Ethan Hawke's character would be a humpback whale. He's a little bit more shy, but then when he does something, he breaks out, and he does at the end sacrifice himself to a certain extent on his principles.
Yep.
But yeah, that's a perfect movie to see that kind of methodology of the baboon methodology of just saying, screw it, I'm going to do what I want.
So that's the baboon marker. Is that just like going rogue and just doing whatever you need to?
Kind of, yeah. They're like, when I compare the baboon and the humpback whale, I would say like the baboon is the voice of a community and the humpback whale is the soul.
Okay.
So,
interesting.
Like, yeah, so they're great at voicing the principles of whatever they believe. Of course, their weakness is they love principles so much and they can get into like one idea, but then they might really get into this idea and they just like jump ship. They're just like, oh, this is a really cool. Like, oh wait, this is also really cool. And then they get really into this. Like, just get really into things. Exactly. And I won't say they change sides, but they might just be like, oh, look, there's a frisbee. Like, if philosophies were frisbees, they would be a dog. They'd just be like, oh, let me follow that one and see how that works, So that would be their weakness, of course. Their strength is like vocalizing whatever their opinions are very well and articulately and powerfully.
Okay. So what are some baboon moments that you've had in your life?
Getting in trouble for sure. I remember, this is a random story, and I know it's the first one that popped in my head. I was in English class in high school, AP English Lit, which sounds like really academic. And it was kind of a crappy course because it had a crappy teacher. And this teacher was definitely one of those, the worst part of being a gatherer, right? Like, she was just like, okay, this is structure. This is what makes you feel important. I'm just going to like go all in on that. And so you'd make kids take a test to get into the class, which I think was bullshit. But she would. So that's all those kids who got into the class thought they were like super smart because like, oh, we got to take a test to get into this class. We're like the elite, and she loved that. So anyway, I thought her tests were total crap because her tests were really like about like what small detail in each of the books that we were reading, which I was not into. So I would send in my test blank. I was just like, here, blank test.
Yeah,
and then she eventually called me in. I was like, what's going on here? I noticed you're not writing the answers. Is it difficult for you? And I was like, no, I just don't like the questions. And so I kind of rebelled a little bit. She failed me actually. But I guess, you got to do what you have to do, I guess. I mean, I wouldn't recommend, my own students that I coach now to do that. But that was probably the purest form of my baboonness in action.
Yeah, I think when I think of baboon, I think of like entrepreneurs, right? It's like the idea of like, I'm going to like bring this thing into the world, and it doesn't fit with anything yet, right? It's a new idea, and kind of moving through whatever kind of like structure is there, right? It's going through and bucking the trends.
Yeah, as opposed to like the other two, which you'll get like baboons will get along with other shamans really well. But yeah, those other two might like do, or they might be better students, like dolphins and pandas. I generally ask that question. I'm trying to figure out, are you a dolphin panda or baboon humpback whale? I always ask, were you a good student? And I just look for the reaction. And generally, if people are slow or like think about it, then I'm like, okay, you're not. Because dolphins and pandas are generally good students. And even if they weren't great students, they enjoyed school. The idea of being around people and that structure they like.
Yeah, I think my wife is on that side. She's also in the mental health profession, and she's just very much like connecting, wants to help, wants to heal, all that kind of stuff. I like that, but my company is more about like instilling principles and like helping people grow, less than like getting really super deep with that.
Well, you're a paladin, you're a crusader, right? And baboons and humpback whales tends to be more on the crusading side. Like, we're like, okay, what's the project? What's the fight now? Okay, it's over. Okay, what's the fight now? Like, we'll tend to balance as opposed to like fitting into a particular organization.
Yeah. Okay. So that tracks to our last one, the Smiths.
The Smiths, always left for last. They have a lot of huge impact though on the world in terms of like when you look at like people who've like at least
inspectors,
right? So Smiths value information. I used to say knowledge, and I stopped saying that because everyone's like, "Oh, I value knowledge," and I'm like, okay, not as much as they do. So now I say information because that's like a less sexier word, you know? Yeah. And to explain that, like in terms of how much they value information, I had a Smith tell me she would go into a burning building, like a burning library, to rescue a book, even if her life was in jeopardy. If she thought that book was the last book of its kind in existence, she's like, "Oh yeah, I'll totally rescue it." I'm like, "Wow, really? Even if there's a chance you die?" She's like, "Well, yeah, but that's how much, you know." That's whereas you tell that to a gatherer, they would be like, "That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard." Like they would just not feel the same way, and that's kind of cool, right? Like it's interesting to see the different perspectives. I don't want to say every Smith would run into a burning building, but they might think about it. They might be like, let me think about that first. So yeah, that's how much they value information. And because they value information, we can separate them into two categories. One meaning the killer whales and the spiders, and they value information that can be useful. They're like, no, I want to know stuff so I can use it and put into practice and like, get something out of it. So they're very ambitious types. The chimpanzees and the owls, not to say they're not ambitious, but they kind of just like information for its own sake. They're just like, oh, that's cool. Like, I don't know, this is kind of fun. And I guess they would be your nerd, and so they're great at research, right? Because they're constantly going to like be working, not necessarily because the information they're finding is useful to them. The information is just cool. But what we've often found is with that mentality, you often find information that really is useful, right? Because you're constantly just pouring through everything. So like on that side, like chimpanzees and owls, that's where you find a lot of inventors or people produce things like Elon Musk would be a chimpanzee, or this is a fictional character, but Iron Man would be a chimpanzee, right? You can constantly see them go, I just like to make cool stuff, and whether it works or not, I don't know. But I'll see, look, I'm going to put a pinwheel on the car. Oh yeah, that's kind of lame. And they might have like 999 bad ideas, right? But the one idea that they do is like, oh, let me put a phone, or let me put a computer into a phone. That'd be kind of cool, right? And everyone's saying that's kind of stupid. Why would you do that? We already have laptops. And then now everyone's carrying a computer in their phone. That's right. So
it's kind of like, it's like Fox mentality, but I'm hearing it's like more inventive and it's more like playful almost, or just like not really like, whereas I imagine a fox is like seeking an outcome, right? This sounds like the chimpanzee is more like exploring and discovering and just like kind of, just for the thrill of creation. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh yeah. Foxes are like cool. Chimpanzees are cool nerds. Right. Like, have you seen Game of Thrones? I use Game of Thrones a lot as a reference point. Oh, if you just took, this will be easy. This is easy because we took the Lannister brothers, Jaime and Tyrion. Okay. What is the chimpanzee?
Yeah.
You got to guess.
Tyrion?
Yeah. Right. But they get along, right? And they're both pretty funny. Like they're both clever, and they're both like chimpanzees, foxes, and baboons often seem similar because we're kind of jokey and we'll be somewhat clever and kind of free flowing. But that's, once again, the value is so different, right? You said the fox is like kind of like, what do I want out of this? Am I getting something out of this? Enjoyment? Like, so we see that when we watch Game of Thrones. Like sometimes Jaime doesn't understand why Tyrion is like so focused, like mentally on something. He's like, I don't understand. It's not a big deal. But of course, Tyrion's a chimpanzee. It's a big deal to him. He likes ideas, right? He kind of fixates on them, and that's good for him and maybe not so good for Jaime, right? And vice versa. So,
yeah. Okay. Yeah, I follow that. And then the final group.
So on the other side, so the killer whales and spiders, they are, they're the ones who are like, they want information for impact. And killer whales I always call like the CEO type. So if you just think about them in terms of information and how they use that information, killer whales are strategic. All Smiths are strategic, but killer whales are more so. And they are, I call them in the book, concurrent planners. Okay. Versus the spiders are contingency planners. So that would just mean the killer whale is like, okay, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and we're all going to do it at the same time. We're all going to do it in conjunction, and we're going to destroy whoever it gets, And spiders are more like, okay, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. But if this happens, this is what we're going to do. And then it's like an algorithm, right? Okay, now that when we do this, and if this happens, then this is what we're going to do. And like they have this whole algorithmic plan for contingency. So yeah, like it would be like in Game of Thrones, the difference between Tywin Lannister, who's a concurrent planner, and Littlefinger, who's a contingency planner. And for those non-Game of Thrones fans out there, maybe like Macbeth, the play Macbeth. That's really nerdy. Wow, I'm bringing up the AP literature already. Like that, Macbeth would be the killer whale, right? He's like got the plan and he just goes for it. But Lady Macbeth would be the spider behind the scenes, kind of like spinning her webs, right?
Yeah, and just make sure that nothing goes wrong, right, and keeping things on the track. Yeah,
right. But they don't like to be the center of attention. They're definitely where killer whales are like, yeah, put me in the front. I don't mind. I'm gonna go.
They want to be like the fighter pilot, right? They want to be the vanguard.
Yeah, they're like the killer whale will stab you in the front. The spider will stab you in the back.
What's it both stabbing? They both got knives.
Yeah, they both got knives though. No, they both got knives. But you might not think the spider has a knife. Where the killer whale will be like, here's my knife. See it? Look, watch this is going in. Yeah.
Well, wasn't that a great stab? Perfectly executed.
Yeah, and then they'll tell you about it too. They're very forceful. By the way, I love killer whales, so it might sound like I'm picking on them. My ex-girlfriend was a killer whale. We still get along. They're very aggressive. I think of Hermione Granger. She's like the perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Right. You think she's a good student, but she's not really. She does it for a purpose, but she breaks the rules all the time as long as it serves her purpose. Right. So killer whales and spiders are by far the best students, especially when they get into the college level, just because, they obviously they prize information and how to use it well, and they're ambitious. So those three things make them great students. And spiders are probably a little bit better than killer whales, but for the most part, those two, if you have someone who's like a great student and proud of it, and by great student, I mean like getting A's on tests, not just like in elementary school, but like at college level, probably one of those two.
Yeah. Well, so I love this. I love this theory. I love that I think it's like super relatable. I think it's really great to like break it down and make it like accessible for people. And you have your book. The link to that will be in the show notes. But I'm also curious for you, like what applications? I mean, we've talked about the business corporate application, but what other applications do you think there are to this?
The number one thing, actually, even if you're in a business setting, the number one thing people ask is like, okay, so who should I hook up with then? Like, really, should I be banging, basically? I'm like, whoa, okay, like that's like, and it's a fun thing. Like, who doesn't like that? Who doesn't do the horoscopes? Like, I'm a Cancer and I go well with whatever, and people are into that. I always play it safe and just say, look, like I don't believe in soulmates, but I do think that the personality types are consistent. So if you are, let's say, a fox and you are going out with a killer whale, then the ways you conflict will be very consistent to other killer whale fox relationships. And the ways that you get along will also be similar. So like if I could just use two people that probably everybody knows, like the Clintons, Bill Clinton is clearly a fox and Hillary is probably a killer whale.
Yeah.
And you can see that Hershey's really ambitious, maybe not necessarily the friendliest and the funniest, where Bill is, he's so smooth. He's got that cool, like I'm a fox, I'm cool kind of guy. But you can see them kind of like where the conflict would rise. Like a killer whale might think that the fox lacks ambition or is maybe a little too unserious. Mm-hmm. And the fox might think that the killer whale is just not as fun as they should be. And I think that's going to be pretty consistent all the way through. Like if you know a fox and you know a killer whale, and that's probably how they're going to relate too. So yeah, that was a long way of saying I don't believe in soulmates, but if you're going to conflict a certain level and you have to be okay with that. If you're not, then you probably should find someone else, right? Because that conflict's not going to go away.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to unpack that. Because that was my next question is like, can people flex out of their personality types, or do you find that it's like more or less containing and rigid?
I love that question because I always say that people can change. And I know people hate that lie, but what I modified say, people can't change because we grow, right? And I think that kind of means we're changing, but we're growing into better or worse versions of ourselves, but I always say like puppies don't become cats, they become dogs, right? And I think if you try to become something you're not, and without having a really secure idea of who you are, then I think that's pretty unhealthy, at the end of the day. But I do think like it's really good to know who you are as an anchor. And I always say, find your anchor. Who are you? So that you're not in danger of becoming someone else. And then once you do, then like you said, you can flex and like kind of go, oh, but my type is really bad at this. So maybe I should take a little bit from this other personality type and what they're doing. It doesn't mean I'm going to value things like they do, but at the very least, I can take some of the things they're doing for the context that I'm in because it's going to help me. Baboons, we're not really great at doing things that we don't like to do. My brother likes to say that, if it takes longer than 15 minutes and I don't want to do it, I'm probably not going to do it. But that's pretty bad when you have to do taxes and things like that. So
yeah, but there's a lot of mandatory shit out there. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I think for me, part of my growth was like figuring out, okay, how do I navigate the things I don't want to do? Taxes. Okay. At least I can hire someone to do taxes and just email them stuff. But even like finishing things, I think sometimes baboons especially when we're younger, we're not always the best at finishing things because we're like, oh, this is so fun. Let me do it. Oh, but this is really cool too. Let me do this. And then we bounce around. And I think just being conscious of that tells me like, okay, I got to like borrow from other types that are good at finishing things. So I can finish at least like 30% of the things that I start, you know?
Yeah, I think I'm very similar. I mean, so much of my like self-development has been learning discipline, frankly, right? And like dealing with being impatient. Like I think that's like my main flaw is I'm very impatient. Maybe it is that baboon type where it's like I will deep dive on something and just like go all the way. And then when I'm done, I'll never touch it again. Right.
Yeah.
But like I don't have that like discipline, just like keep going on the treadmill or just grinding or any of that kind of thing.
Oh, 100%. Like the baboon type in Game of Thrones is Daenerys Targaryen, right? And
yeah.
You know, I mean, everyone's like, oh, you just picked a cool person. You know, baboons are not always the cool character. Just in Game of Thrones, we get the cool character. But I love there's a line there where the guy says, like, what are you going to do now? You're just going to sit on the throne? Like, you're a conqueror. You don't sit on thrones. Like, we're not particularly good at running a kingdom. Oftentimes we get bored. But conquering is fun, right? Because it's like, okay, I got this purpose. I got this thing that I really believe in. I'm going to go all out on it. But then, of course, the hangover is it's like, okay, now that it's done, like, what do I do now? Let me find someone else to take care of this and let me go on to something else, right? Like that's the baboon in us. But I think completing those tasks is important because sometimes we don't always complete the task.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And there's some things like you said, like, you know, paying taxes or like going to the gym or having a diet or like discipline. Like you just need that. You just need to like get used to the slow grind. And those have been always more challenging for me is those types of things, you know?
Yeah. And that's
not that exciting.
Baboons. Yeah. As shamans, we like people. So I always think like if I have to do something like that, like if I have to go to the gym, it's gonna be hard for me to go by myself, but find a friend, you know, and that'll be fun. And then you can like talk shit about things and talk about stuff you like while you're working out. And then it just doesn't feel like you're working out as much. So
yeah. So I think that's a key point, right? It's like knowing your personality and knowing, how to supplement that when you do have to interact with the world. Because like you're saying, and I agree, it's like it's a gatherer world out there, right? Gatherer, sub-hunter, right? World out there. So if you're a shaman or a smith, you know, specifically, is learning strategies to exist in a culture that heavily favors another personality type.
Yeah, and gatherers, I mean, not to pick on them again, but gatherers don't see shamans and smiths much. They see hunters for sure, because they're like a third of the population. And they're generally like, oh, that person who I disagree with, but they're kind of cool and they have a lot of fun. So I'm not opposed to them. And I would like to marry them. Oftentimes gatherers, I mean, that's the most common coupling is a gatherer and hunter because their strengths complement each other very well, but they're not exactly the same because you generally, if you have two people that are really similar, you're going to have a lot of conflict that's tough to deal with. But yeah, they don't really even see shamans and smiths. They're just like, who are these weird versions of us? You know, they need to like change, you know? So it can be difficult. And I work with a lot of students and like young students. Like I generally start my students that I coach around like 11 or 12.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And so that's where I can be at least very beneficial in terms of figuring out what they are and how to make them, like you said, grow and flex versus changing and becoming someone different.
Yeah. Well, so as we're moving toward the end here, I'm curious, like, where do you go with this? I mean, you got the book, right? You're doing like some of this coaching. Like what's next for you?
You know, I would love to, I mean, I have the second book planned out if my publisher and wants to publish it and my agent wants to sell it for me. But it's clearly like the one that everyone asks. People want a romance book because my book is
the dating version of it. It's so good. It's a dating version of the personality type.
It's like this dating version, love version, romance version with a big heart and an all unread. No, because my book is mainly, it is prescriptive to a certain extent, but my book teaches people to be the test, right? Because, you know, I have a test on my website and I think that is my CTA and I encourage everyone to take it. However, you know, at the end of the day, tests are just, you know, cookie cutter things that don't always work for everyone. So the book in and of itself teaches people the methodology and breaks down everything that I broke down here, but a little bit more detailed. So in a sense, once you read the book, then you'll know how to read people better. And once you do that, then I think the prescriptive stuff can be really helpful. I think sometimes if you get the diagnosis wrong, then the treatment can be pretty harmful. So that's why I focused mainly on a book that helps people diagnose people's personality types. And so I'd love to do a more prescriptive one saying, okay, now that you know you are a fox or a beaver, you know, and you're with this type, or maybe you should be looking for these types because of these certain things. I think that would be probably fun. Everyone asks about that. It's like, okay, like write a book about who I should hook up with, you know? So
yeah, I think there's a ton of value in that, right? It's like now what do you do about it, right? Whether it be relationships or I can imagine as a parenting book too, right? Or like you said, team dynamics, you know, how do you talk to people that are different from you?
Right. And, I would love to, the parenting one and I would be able to do a lot more from my own professional experience, right? Because I've worked with a lot of students and a lot of parents. Yeah. The romantic, I don't have any professional experience with romantic counseling. So I'd have to do some research and talk to people and, maybe get like a co-author for that. Even though, obviously personally I have it and I know the methodology really well, but definitely parenting and working with kids, that is something that I think a lot of parents are really into too. When I used to teach my teachers this, when I owned my education company, those are the two questions people would ask: who I should hook up with and starting to relate things to their significant other, or relating things to their kids or their parents. Right? They're like, oh, no wonder I'm so screwed up because my mom or dad did this and they were probably this type and I'm like this type. Or no wonder why I hate this kid more than I hate the other kid because they're like this and, so.
Yeah, well, it's super helpful because it makes it so less personal. Right. If it's like, a beaver and a chimpanzee having an argument, it's so much better than you and your dad fighting. Right. I think it lets people get a handle on it and really understand what's happening.
When talking to people, I'm always like, once you say, oh, you're probably an elephant, let's say, and then you can just start talking about an elephant and talk about their strengths, which everybody loves, but also weaknesses, which are helpful, but not everybody loves. But then it in a weird way, they don't see it as you making a judgment on them or observing their weaknesses. You're observing an elephant's weaknesses theoretically, even though essentially that's what you're telling them is, these are your weaknesses.
Helps a ton, right? Because you guys have those hard conversations without people's feelings getting hurt as much.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Well, fantastic. Well, Eric, thank you so much for being on the show. So we'll have a link to the book in the show notes. We'll also have a CTA. But Eric, where can people find you online if they want to learn more about you and about this personality theory?
So my website, that's not the website where the test is, strangely enough, but my website for my coaching and my creative space, you can find it all under Project Utopia, and Utopia like YOU, like YouTube. And then you can find me on Instagram, The Power of Personality. I'm not huge on social media, so, but find me on Instagram anyway at The Power of Personality.
Great. Yeah. Check them out. Follow it. It sounds to be super useful, whether you're, a parent or you're a counselor, a lot of counselors listen to this show, or you're just someone looking to hook up with an animal that fits your personality.
Or all of the above. You can be a parent, counselor, and looking to hook up,
That's true. You can have the trifecta. And then if that's you, if you're listening and that's you, just buy this book. You get the book because I think it's going to answer a lot of the questions that you have.
Yes.
Okay. So Eric, again, thank you so much for joining us. And listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast. We will see you next week with another episode.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.